My son looked me dead in the eye and said, "Go die in peace." So I did the one thing he never expected. I lived long enough to give my real son what he truly deserved. Welcome back to Granny's Truth, where real stories meet real consequences. If you're new here, thank you for joining this community of strong voices, hard truths, and second chances. Before we begin, we want to know, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? Type it in the comments below. We love seeing this family come together from all around the world. Now let's get into today's story. I used to believe love could fix anything. That if you just kept pouring it out, eventually even the coldest heart would soften. That belief nearly cost me my life. My name is Clara Delaney. I'm 76 years old. And for most of my life I thought I was doing the right thing, especially when it came to my son Derek. My only biological child. My baby boy. I spoiled him from the moment he was born. If he wanted something, I gave it. If he failed, I blamed the world instead of holding him accountable. I told myself it was love. But now I see it was something else. Guilt, fear, and a refusal to see what he was becoming. Before Derek there was Isaiah. We adopted him when Walter, my late husband, and I thought we couldn't have children. Isaiah was just 6 months old when we brought him home. I remember the way he clutched my finger with his tiny hand, like he'd already decided we were his. Walter adored him. Called him his little judge even back then. Isaiah always had a seriousness to him even as a child. Thoughtful. Quiet. Smart in a way that made you proud just watching him read. When Derek came along 2 years later, everything shifted. Isaiah became the older brother overnight and I became a mother who tried to balance two hearts with only one hand. Looking back, I see it clear as day. I gave Isaiah rules. I gave Derek excuses. I made Isaiah share. I let Derek take. And when Walter died from kidney disease 15 years ago, the imbalance only got worse. I was grieving. I was lost. And Derek knew how to fill that hole with charm and manipulation. Now here I am in my own house walking on eggshells. Derek is 43. Jobless. Unstable. And living under my roof. He says it's just until he gets back on his feet. But it's been 3 years. 3 years of missing money, broken promises, and late-night arguments that leave me in tears. He doesn't hit me, no. But sometimes I think maybe that would be easier than the things he says. Isaiah lives across the city. He's a judge now. A good one from what I hear. We haven't spoken much in recent years. Not since the falling out. There was an argument. Nothing dramatic, just the kind that stretches into silence. Derek was part of it. Stirring things. Telling me Isaiah looked down on us. That he didn't want anything to do with this family. And I believed it. Because I wanted to believe in Derek. This morning started like most others. I made coffee. Took my pills. Turned on the old gospel station I always listened to. Derek came stumbling in around 11, still smelling like last night. He didn't say good morning. Just grabbed a cup, sloshed coffee onto the counter and asked if I'd remembered to pay his phone bill. When I told him no, not yet, he slammed the cup down so hard it cracked. "You're slipping, Ma," he muttered. "Maybe it's time you let go of all this. Go die in peace already. Let somebody else handle things." He said it like he was offering advice. Like it was reasonable. I stared at him. My own son. The same boy I held through fevers, defended in school meetings, and bailed out of trouble more times than I can count. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat closed up like someone had reached in and twisted it shut. He left the room like nothing happened. I sat there for hours, shaking. That sentence, those 6 words, played on repeat in my mind like a song I didn't want to hear. Go die in peace. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my bedroom with the light on, staring at a framed photo of Walter. In it we're young. Happy. Isaiah's sitting on Walter's lap. Derek's in my arms, squirming. I remember that day. I remember how proud I was of our family. And I remember Walter whispering to me once when Derek was 16 and already causing trouble, "You've got to stop coddling him, Clara. Or one day he's gonna make you regret it." That day is here. I got up quietly and locked my bedroom door. I pulled my old bank documents out from the drawer and started reading. I hadn't looked at these in years. There were old life insurance papers. A will Walter and I had written together. It still listed both boys as beneficiaries. But now my heart felt different. Heavy, tired, afraid, and ashamed. Because the truth is I failed Isaiah. Not just once. Over and over. He was the one who cleaned up after Derek's tantrums. The one who worked hard, stayed out of trouble, and never asked for anything. And I let Derek twist my view of him until all I saw was distance. But distance doesn't mean disloyalty. I picked up the phone around midnight. My hands were still trembling. When Isaiah answered, I didn't even know what to say. I just cried. "Ma," he said softly. "Don't cry." "I'm sorry," I said. "I should have listened to you. I should have seen it. I let him come between us." There was silence. Then his voice again. "Steady. Phil. You've said that before. But I still ask about you. Every week." And he did. I knew it was true. My neighbor told me once. Isaiah had called when I was in the hospital last year and Derek never even told me. "I'm okay," I lied. "You sure?" he asked. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "I just needed to hear your voice." He didn't say much after that. Just stayed on the line until I said goodnight. That night I didn't sleep, but I didn't cry either. For the first time in years I started waking up. The next few weeks felt like a fog. I went about my days pretending everything was normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. I watched Derek closely, how he moved, how he talked, the way he stared at my purse like he was measuring what he could take. I didn't sleep much. I kept the lights on at night and the door locked. I started hiding my jewelry in odd places like inside the flower tin or under the mattress. It felt ridiculous, but I was scared. Of my own son. Every time Derek walked into the room my body tensed. I never thought I'd fear him. Not my baby. But the truth was clearer now than it had ever been. He didn't see me as a mother. He saw me as a wallet with a weak pulse. I called Isaiah again. I didn't tell him everything, just that things were getting worse. He didn't ask for details. He never pressured. He just listened. "You need anything, you call," he said. "Don't wait too long next time." His voice always calmed me like a steady hand on the shoulder. I could hear the disappointment beneath the kindness, but he never said it out loud. That made it worse somehow. The way he still cared even after everything. One afternoon I asked Derek to take the trash out. It wasn't a big request. But he rolled his eyes and muttered under his breath. Something about how I should be grateful he was even there. Grateful. That word stayed with me. Grateful for what? For his presence? For his anger? For the way he'd made me feel like a burden in my own home? I began writing in a notebook at night. Not a journal, just thoughts. Fears. Regrets. And plans. I called the lawyer Isaiah once recommended to me just to ask a few questions. I didn't mention Derek's name. I just wanted to know what my options were. The lawyer told me the will I had was outdated. That if anything happened to me it could be contested. Especially by someone living with me. That shook me. I thanked him and hung up. The next day I quietly began putting things in motion. That same evening, Derek barged into the room while I was watching television. His eyes were wide, twitchy. I knew that look. He needed a fix. "You got money?" he said. I shook my head. "Not right now." "You lying," he snapped. "Where's your purse?" "I don't have anything on me," I said, trying to stay calm. He lunged toward me and grabbed my necklace, an old gold chain Walter gave me for our 30th anniversary. I clutched it, but he yanked hard. The clasp broke and I stumbled backward, hitting the corner of the coffee table. My elbow and hip screamed in pain. I cried out, but he was already gone, storming out of the house. I sat there, gasping, holding my side. Tears came fast. Not just from the pain, but from the shame. How did I let it come to this? I picked myself up, grabbed my coat, and walked outside. I didn't even lock the door. I stood at the curb and waved down a cab. When the driver asked where to, I gave him the address from memory. Isaiah's address. When I rang the doorbell, it was almost midnight. The porch light came on. The door opened and there he was, my adopted son, standing barefoot in sweatpants and a t-shirt. He looked at me, then at the bruise forming on my arm, the blood on my palm, and the tears in my eyes. "Ma," he said. I couldn't speak. My throat closed up. I just shook my head, trembling. He reached out and pulled me inside without another word. Isaiah didn't ask what happened right away. He sat me down on the couch, brought me a glass of water, and called someone. I didn't know who until I heard him say, "Yes. Elder abuse. Immediate action. I'm bringing the complaint to the bench myself." He hung up and finally turned to me. "What did he do?" I told him. "Not everything, just enough." He listened in silence, his jaw tight, his eyes calm but burning. You're safe now, he said. You stay here. He brought me to the guest room. Tucked a blanket around my legs like I was a child again. I didn't sleep that night either, but not because I was scared. I was just stunned. That after everything, Isaiah still opened his door. Still called me Ma. Still protected me. The next day he drove me to the clinic. Took pictures of the bruises. Helped me file an official report. Isaiah called a detective he trusted from his time on the bench and personally pushed the case through. By evening, Derek had been arrested. Isaiah didn't gloat. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just said, "You deserve peace. And I'm going to make sure you get it." That night, while I sat in his kitchen sipping soup he made himself, I looked at him and whispered, "I don't deserve this kindness." He looked up. "Then let me give you something you never had before. Closure." For the first time in a long time I believed it might actually be possible. The house felt too quiet those first few days, but not in a bad way. It was a peaceful quiet. No slamming doors. No footsteps pacing through the hallway at night. No tension hovering in the air like smoke. I was safe. But my mind hadn't caught up to that yet. Every sudden sound still made me flinch. Every creak of the floorboards had me turning my head. My body was out of danger, but my spirit was still in survival mode. Isaiah noticed it too. He didn't push. He didn't flood me with questions or try to smother me with comfort. He gave me time. He gave me space. But most importantly, he gave me dignity. He let me move at my own pace, even if that meant sitting in silence some mornings, just staring out his kitchen window while he made eggs. I couldn't help but study him sometimes when he wasn't looking. He had Walter's stillness, that quiet strength that didn't need to announce itself. And his voice, low, firm, and patient, felt like something I'd been missing for years. I'd been so used to chaos, to Derek's loudness and rage, that I forgot what a calm home could feel like. One morning I woke up early. The sun hadn't risen yet, but I felt restless. I went to the living room and found Isaiah already there, reading through a stack of documents. He looked up, surprised to see me awake. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. I shook my head and sat down slowly across from him. "What are you working on?" "Your case," he said simply. "And something else." He slid one of the papers across the table. It was a revised will. Blank, but with all the sections labeled. I stared at it. "You don't have to do anything right now," he said. "But I thought you should know your options." I touched the paper gently like it might burn me. "I haven't even thought that far ahead," I whispered. "I know. That's why I have." I looked up at him then, and the emotion caught me off guard. Not just the guilt, but the grief. The years we lost. The moments I missed. The trust one let erode because I was too afraid to confront the truth. "Isaiah," I said, my voice cracking, "I'm sorry I didn't protect you better. I should have seen it sooner. The way Derek poisoned everything. The way I let him." He didn't say anything right away. He set his pen down and leaned back, hands folded in his lap. "You were grieving," he said. "After Dad died, you were alone. I understood that. That doesn't excuse it." "No, but it explains it. I never needed you to be perfect. I just needed you to remember who I was." His words hit me harder than anything Derek ever said. I reached across the table and took his hand. "I do now. I promise I do." We sat like that for a while, the paperwork forgotten between us. That moment wasn't about legal matters. It was about healing. And I felt something inside me begin to shift. The guilt didn't vanish, but it softened. It stopped strangling me. Later that week, Isaiah drove me back to my old house. The police had already processed the scene. Derek wouldn't be allowed near it again. Still, the moment I stepped through the door, the weight of the past slammed into me like a wall. The smell, the silence, the way my favorite chair still had the cushion slightly dented from where I sat every night pretending I was fine. I walked through the rooms slowly, touching the walls, the pictures, the little figurines I'd collected over the years. They all felt like relics from someone else's life. Someone who didn't know better. "I don't want to stay here," I told Isaiah. "You don't have to," he said. "We'll get everything packed up. Keep what matters. The rest can go." I nodded. "I want to start over." We spent the next 2 days boxing things up. He hired movers and even found a small, sunny condo for me near his place. It had a balcony and an elevator and just enough space to feel like mine. When I moved in, it felt like exhaling after holding my breath for 10 years. Isaiah came by every evening that first week. Sometimes he brought food, other times books or flowers. But mostly he brought himself. He sat with me, talked with me, let me share stories I hadn't told in years. One night we made dinner together. Nothing fancy, just collard greens, cornbread and baked chicken. The kind of meal Walter used to love. After we ate, I sat Isaiah down in the living room. My hands were shaking slightly, but my heart felt steady. I need you to read something, I said. He looked confused but took the envelope I handed him. He unfolded the paper and read. It was my new will. Already signed and notarized. I left everything to you, I said softly. The house, the accounts, the insurance policy. Everything. He looked up, eyes wide. Ma. No. Let me finish. I swallowed. I know I wasn't always the mother you deserved. And I know this doesn't make up for the years I spent blind. But it's not about the money. It's about what's right. You were the son who honored me. The son who protected me. You didn't owe me anything and still you stood by me when I had nothing left. That deserves more than words. He set the paper down gently and came to sit beside me. He didn't say thank you. He didn't cry. He just wrapped his arms around me and whispered, I love you, Ma. It was the first time I'd heard those words without pain in years. And I clung to them like a life raft. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles, I realized something. I had lived long enough to change the will. But more importantly, I had lived long enough to change the story. I thought changing the will would bring me a sense of closure, but what it really gave me was clarity. I started to see my life not as a string of mistakes but as a path that had finally curved in the right direction. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to walk through my door with bad news. I wasn't dreading a phone call or flinching at every slammed cupboard. I was free. My days settled into a peaceful rhythm. I spent mornings watering the little balcony garden Isaiah helped me plant. In the afternoons, I sometimes sat at the window with my tea and watched the people in the courtyard go about their lives. There was something soothing about the stillness, the normalcy. Isaiah visited regularly. Sometimes he brought groceries or books, sometimes just himself. Each time, he brought a piece of comfort I hadn't realized I was missing. One afternoon, I found a box in the back of my closet filled with old photographs. Most were faded, curled at the edges. I sat on the floor and sifted through them one by one. There were pictures of Walter holding baby Isaiah, his face full of pride. Others showed birthday parties, school plays, backyard barbecues. And then came the ones with Derek, grinning wild-eyed, always at the center. I stared at one where the two boys stood side by side. Isaiah's hand rested lightly on Derek's shoulder, and Derek had a crooked smile. I remember that day. It was the last time they both laughed in the same room. I held that photo for a long time. Later that evening, Isaiah came by with dinner. We sat on the couch, plates balanced on our knees, the TV playing some rerun we weren't really watching. I found the old photos, I said quietly. He glanced at me, curious. Yeah. There's one of you and Derek. You were maybe 10. He had just gotten that red bike he wanted. Isaiah nodded. I remember that. Dad made us take turns riding it. I smiled faintly. You always let him go twice as long. He always cried if I didn't. There was no anger in his voice. No bitterness. Just truth. I wish I had done more to balance things, I said. I wish I had seen the way he leaned on you for everything and how I let it happen. Isaiah set his plate down and turned to face me. You can't go back, Ma. You can only go forward. And you've already done the hardest part. You chose to see things clearly. That's more than most people do. I looked at him, my heart aching with gratitude and guilt. You don't have to keep forgiving me. I'm not forgiving you, he said. I'm just loving you. That's different. The next week, the court date for Derek's sentencing arrived. I didn't want to go, but I knew I needed to. Isaiah stood beside me in the courtroom, his presence grounding me. Derek was brought in wearing a wrinkled jumpsuit, wrists cuffed. He didn't look at me. Didn't acknowledge me. When the judge read out the charges, assault, elder abuse, attempted robbery, I felt my knees weaken, but I stayed upright. I remembered the boy he used to be. The way he'd cling to my skirt when he was scared. The way he'd fall asleep in my lap. I remembered the first time he said, Mama, and how it melted my heart. But that boy was long gone. What stood before me was a man I didn't recognize. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I stepped forward slowly. My name is Clara Delaney, I began. I'm 76 years old. I raised Derek. I also raised Isaiah, who stands beside me now. I made mistakes. I admit that. I see them clearly now. But one thing I never expected was to fear for my life in my own home. I never thought I'd have to hide my jewelry or sleep with my door locked. I never imagined my own son would try to hurt me for money. I'm not here today for revenge. I'm here because I deserve peace. And I won't be silent about what was done to me. The courtroom was quiet. Even the judge looked moved. Derek didn't speak. He didn't apologize. When the sentence was handed down, 3 years in state prison with mandatory rehab, I felt no joy. But I did feel relief. And that was enough. Outside the courthouse, Isaiah took my hand. You did good, Ma. I did what I had to. We drove home in silence. Not the heavy kind, but the kind that comes after a storm. The air felt clearer. The road looked different. A few days later, Isaiah brought over a photo frame. Inside was a picture of Walter, me, and Isaiah taken the year Isaiah graduated from law school. I had forgotten it existed. I stared at it for a long time before placing it on the mantel in my new living room. This is home now, I said. Yes, Isaiah agreed. It is. That night as I settled into bed, I thought about how far we had come. Not just physically but emotionally. I had been at the edge. I had heard the words meant to push me into the grave. But I didn't let them. I chose to live. I chose to heal. I chose to give my legacy to the son who earned it, not with blood but with love. And in doing so I finally found peace. My days after the trial took on a new rhythm. Quieter. Softer. I found myself waking up early not because I had to but because I wanted to. I opened the windows to let in the morning air. I made breakfast slowly the way I used to when Walter was alive. Grits on the stove, eggs just right, and gospel music humming low in the background. This time, though, it wasn't for anyone else. It was for me. Isaiah visited often. Not out of duty but out of love. Sometimes he came by to check on me, other times just to sit in silence with a cup of tea. I looked forward to those visits more than I'd admit. We didn't always talk about the past. We didn't have to. Sometimes healing means talking through the pain. Other times it just means being near someone who never made you feel like one. One afternoon I was sitting on my little balcony tending to the herbs Isaiah helped me plant, basil, rosemary, and mint, when I heard the soft knock at the door. Isaiah let himself in carrying a small grocery bag. "You're cooking again?" I asked, smiling. "Thought I'd try," he said, setting the bag on the counter. "You made it look easy last week. You forget I used to feed a house full of boys. And your father had an appetite like a bear." He smiled at that. It was a smile I hadn't seen since the day he passed the bar. A real one. Not polite. Not forced. We cooked together that night. I let him season the chicken while I handled the collard greens. It felt like the kind of night you want to put in a jar and save. After dinner I asked him to stay a little longer. He sat across from me at the kitchen table sipping sweet tea. "There's something I've been thinking about," I said. Isaiah looked up. "I never really asked you what it felt like," I continued. "Growing up beside Derek. Watching how different I treated you both." He paused for a moment, then set his glass down. "I think I always knew," he said, "that I wasn't treated the same. But I also knew it wasn't because you didn't love me. It was because you were scared. Scared of losing Derek. Scared of doing it wrong. I saw it in your eyes." I nodded, swallowing a lump in my throat. "I wish I had done better." "You're doing better now," he said. "That counts." That night I pulled out an old keepsake box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were little things, cards, dried flowers, and a letter Walter wrote me when we first brought Isaiah home. I reread that letter twice. He wrote about how love wasn't measured by blood, but by sacrifice and consistency. Walter always had a way of seeing truth before the rest of us caught up. I decided the next day to do something more permanent. I called my attorney and scheduled a visit. Isaiah drove me. He didn't ask what it was for. He just held the door open and waited patiently while I handled my business. When we got back home, I handed him a manila envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Something official," I said. He opened it, brows furrowing as he read. "You put my name on everything," he said quietly. "I did." He shook his head. "You didn't have to." "I did," I said again. "Because I don't want there to be any question. Not in court. Not in family gossip. Not in your heart. This is your home now, Isaiah. Not just the condo. Not just the keys. My name, my legacy. Everything I have left, I'm leaving it to you. Because you've already given me more than I can ever repay. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he folded the papers neatly, placed them back in the envelope and reached for my hand. I'll take care of it, he said. I'll take care of you. We sat like that for a long time, the late afternoon sun painting golden stripes across the floor. I didn't feel heavy anymore. I didn't feel afraid. I felt like I had finally done something right. Later that week, we attended a small service for Walter's birthday. Just the two of us. We brought flowers and Isaiah read a short scripture. I stood beside him and listened to the words, letting them sink in. I imagined Walter smiling somewhere, watching us rebuild what he always hoped we would. When we got home, I cooked one of Walter's favorite meals, beef stew and cornbread. Isaiah insisted on washing the dishes. I let him. I sat down with a book and watched him from the kitchen doorway. That's when it really hit me, not just what I had lost over the years but what I had found again. I hadn't just survived. I had rebuilt something. Something better. That night I wrote in my notebook again. Only this time it wasn't about fear or regret. It was about gratitude. I wrote about second chances. About love that doesn't fade just because it was once overlooked. About sons who show up when it counts. And about mothers who learn, even in old age, how to do right by the ones who always stood in the shadows. I closed the notebook and placed it by my bedside. I didn't need to write more. The next chapter was already being lived, one quiet day at a time. I never thought peace would come to me in old age. For a long time, I assumed I'd leave this world with regrets on my shoulders and silence in my home. But things change. Sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. And if you're lucky, life hands you one last chance to do right by the people you wronged, even if they never asked for it. Isaiah kept his promise. He didn't just take care of my affairs, he took care of me. He made sure I never went to a doctor's appointment alone. He checked in every evening with a call or a knock. He handled the bills, the paperwork, even small things like renewing my ID or fixing a loose step outside. Not because he had to, but because that's who he was. Who he'd always been. One afternoon I sat on the balcony watching the rain. It was soft and steady, tapping against the railing in a rhythm that reminded me of the lullabies I used to hum when the boys were small. Isaiah stepped out with a blanket and draped it over my shoulders before pulling up a chair beside me. "You cold?" he asked. "Not anymore." We sat there a long while listening to the rain. "I keep thinking about how fast life moves," I said. "One day you're folding baby clothes, the next you're rewriting your will." Isaiah chuckled. "That's one way to put it. I used to think dying would be the hardest part," I continued. "But I was wrong. It's living with your own decisions. That's the part that takes courage." He nodded, not needing to say anything more. A week later I hosted a small dinner. Just a few friends from the community, my church sister Alma, and of course Isaiah. It wasn't a special occasion, but I felt like celebrating something I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was freedom. Maybe forgiveness. Or maybe it was just the warmth of having love in the room again. As people gathered, I moved slowly but proudly through the kitchen, checking dishes and refilling glasses. My legs weren't what they used to be, but my spirit felt stronger than it had in years. At the end of the night, Isaiah stayed behind to help me clean. He was putting away leftovers when I touched his arm. "There's one more thing I want you to have," I said. He turned to me, curious. "It's in the top drawer of my nightstand." He went and came back with a small velvet box. Inside was a silver pocket watch, one Walter had carried for decades. I had kept it hidden all these years, unsure who it should go to. Isaiah opened it gently. Inside the lid was an engraving. Not Walter's initials, but a date. The day we adopted Isaiah. "He bought this the day we brought you home," I said softly. "Said it was the day time started moving differently." Isaiah's eyes filled, but he said nothing. He just nodded and placed the watch carefully back in the box. "I don't deserve this," he said. "You deserve more than this," I told him. "But it's a start." The next morning I woke up early, made myself some tea, sat at the table and wrote one final letter. Not for a lawyer or a court. Not even for Isaiah. Just for myself. I wrote that I forgave myself. Not because I earned it, but because I finally understood that regret only has power if you let it stay unanswered. I wrote that Isaiah was my son in every way that mattered. And I wrote that Derek, wherever he was, would have to face his own truth one day without my protection. I sealed the letter and tucked it into the back of my notebook. That afternoon, Isaiah stopped by with a bouquet of yellow tulips. Just felt like flowers today, he said with a smile. I laughed and placed them in a vase near the window. We ate lunch, shared a piece of peach cobbler, and sat quietly listening to the old Motown station I kept playing on Sundays. Before he left, he hugged me gently. Anything you need, I'm right up the road, he said. I watched him walk out with that steady stride, tall and calm, carrying a piece of my heart in his every step. When the door closed, I didn't feel alone. I felt full. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, hands folded over the quilt my mother gave me years ago. My eyes were tired, but my soul was at ease. You see, when Derek told me to go die in peace, he meant it as an insult. A shove toward the grave. But I took it as a challenge. So I lived. I lived long enough to reclaim my dignity. I lived long enough to right a terrible wrong. I lived long enough to hold my real son's hand and say, I see you now. And I lived long enough to change the will, not out of spite but out of love. Because peace, real peace, isn't something you wait for. Something you choose. And I chose it with every day I kept living.